Today, we are excited to welcome Erika Anthony, co-founder and executive director of Cleveland Votes. Erika co-founded Cleveland Votes with Crystal Bryant in 2014, and for the first 8 years of the organization, she served as an advisor while maintaining other full-time positions. In March of 22, Erika was named the organization's inaugural executive director and joined the team full-time. She prides herself in being a connector, a systems thinker, and is passionate about cultivating change for our community. Her prior positions focused on community, racial equity, and social justice as she worked with the Centers for Families and Children, Oriana House, Cleveland Neighborhood Progress, and the Ohio Transformation Fund. She also gives back to Greater Cleveland, having served on boards including the Cuyahoga County Public Defender Commission, Midtown Cleveland, Inc., Edwin's, the Cleveland Young Professionals Senate, IdeaStream, Community Advisory Board, just to name a few. She has also served as an adjunct professor teaching policy at Case Western Reserve University's Mandel School of Applied Social Sciences. We are also excited to call her a graduate of 2 CLC programs, Civic Leadership Institute in 2010 and the Cleveland Bridge Builders class of 2014. Please welcome Erika.
Thank you so much for that beautiful introduction. You know, I had to sneak it in the chat real quick before I unmuted about the best class ever. Good afternoon, everyone. It is such a pleasure to be here with you all. As Rachel said, this is an exciting time, not just for myself, but for my entire team here at Cleveland Votes. So I appreciate you all taking time out of your day to have lunch and chat about this election. The last I heard, we have a major election coming up, 61 days and 12 hours. We're not counting at all. For us, you know, November 6th is like, but it is quickly approaching. It's been a whirlwind of a year. And so today I just want to level set a little bit about, you know, what you can expect over the next couple of weeks and how you can prepare to be election ready on November 5th. So I will jump right in. First and foremost, I think it's really important, just like when we are instructed on a plane, you know, you have to put the oxygen mask on for ourselves first before we can help others. And so in order to be a change agent in our community, we have to know the information and have the information ourselves first before we can communicate effectively to family members, colleagues, neighbors. We are unfortunately in an era of mis and disinformation. So it is critically important that we verify our sources. I like to think that we are one of the go-to sources, hopefully, that people can come to for accurate information. Our team takes great pride in making sure that, you know, we're not feeding into that mis and disinformation. So it's incredibly important to identify those trusted messengers in the community where you can get information that is fact-based. Now, offline on your own time, you know, I'm not going to, you know, and opine on how to spend that time venting or, you know, thinking about all the things that swirl around the election. But for our case, as a nonpartisan organization, as our tagline says, we are here to educate, connect, and empower. That is our main priority. So 61 days, 12 hours, we're not counting. When I say make a voter plan, what does that mean? It's really making sure that you understand how are you going to cast your ballot, right? There are a lot of steps that go into casting our ballot, and that does not actually have to wait until November 5th. And so one of the things that we encourage people is not to think about this on November 3rd or November 4th. It's really important to start thinking about it right now. We all have very busy lives. We have unexpected things that may pull us away on election day. And so thankfully, we do have early voting, which is not something that all states have. And that allows us to really think about how we can cast our ballot early or vote by mail. So speaking of which, there are 3 ways that you can cast your ballot this year and pretty much every year. You can request a vote by mail application or absentee. Those terms are typically interchanged. And that basically means that you're filling out a form that's issued by the Secretary of State via the Board of Elections. If you're here in the county, that would be Cuyahoga County Board of Elections. And then once you complete that form and that is submitted, you are asking basically for your ballot to be mailed to your house. Now, 4 years ago, which sounds pretty wild, we were unfortunately all in the midst of COVID. And for many people, voting by mail was something foreign, myself included. I'm an election day voter. I like to go. It's ceremonial. Me and my husband get up, we get our coffee, you know, we go cast our ballot. And then we got to get that sticker because that's important. If I don't have my sticker, then I'm not walking out of that polling location. So For us, I think only one other time prior to 2020, due to a family situation, I had to vote by mail. But for many people, that was a new occurrence for them as a method to cast their ballot. And a lot of people have opted to continue to do it that way for a multitude of reasons. There might be transportation barriers, there might be scheduling challenges with your job that may not allow you to go on election day. So it is definitely a great option to consider. You also have the benefit of having your smartphone or your laptop or devices right there. And so you can, continue your research or look up the issues that'll be on our ballot. Second option is to vote early. And so the voter registration deadline for this upcoming election is October 7th. I will send links to Rachel that can go in the follow-up email, but all this information is available through the Cuyahoga County Board of Elections website. We also have a handy dandy election guide. I have visuals for y'all today. And so yes, this will also be part of the follow-up email with links where you can access this information on our website as well. But it's critically important that if you are not registered, or you just may want to double check. You may have seen in the news over the last couple of weeks, there have been some recent voter purges. And so even if you think, you know what, I've been voting consistently, Ericka, I'm good to go. I'm going to show up on November 5th. I'm going to be straight. Please, please, please just take 30 seconds, even after this call, and go to the Board of Elections website. I have received far too many calls on election day with very disappointed voters who thought that their registration was current and up to date. And for a multitude of reasons at time 104 today, they were not. So it's critically important that even if you have consistently voted, just take 10 seconds, hop on the Board of Elections website and confirm that your registration is current. So as long as you are registered by October 7th, you can, number one, vote by mail, which we talked about. And you can also vote early at the Board of Elections. We are really lucky. Our office is actually across the street from the Board of Elections. So the last couple of years, we've been voting as a team, which has been a lot of fun. My comms person loves it, then we get good content. But it's really great to go there during the week, as someone who is literally right across the street and can see the traffic that, is either happening or not happening. It's a great way to think about casting your ballot. The lines tend to be far less longer compared to what they are going to be, particularly this year for a presidential election year. So definitely consider early voting. The schedule is also available on the Board of Elections website. I do encourage you to actually check the schedule because it will vary over the next month and a half once early voting starts. And then your last option, of course, is to cast your ballot on Election Day, which is on Tuesday, November 5th this year. Polls are open from 6:30 a.m. to 7:30 p.m. The other encouragement that we provide folks is to confirm your polling location. Polling locations change. And another, disappointing call that I tend to receive on election day is, hey, I went to my polling location. It's no longer my polling location. They want me to vote provisionally. We do not want folks to vote provisionally because that means your vote is not being counted until after the election. And so it's critically important that you are confirming your voter polling location. For a number of years, I lived in Lakewood. I went to the same elementary school. And then something told me, because, I always think of myself last after, we get everybody else organized in the community. And I said, let me double check and make sure my voting location is the same. And it wasn't. It had moved to one of the condos in Lakewood. And so I was grateful that I did actually double check that before heading out to vote that day. So it's critically important that you do that. In the midst of all of this, we also want to make sure that we're taking time to understand what's on our ballot. For many of us, a lot of it will be the same. Top of the ticket will be the president race, but we have a number of other critically important races that are happening here in Ohio. So statewide, we have Supreme Court, we have our US Senate race, we have our state legislators as well. And then locally here in Cuyahoga County, we have our arts and culture ballot initiative, as well as if you're in Cleveland, the Cleveland Metropolitan School District levy. We have statewide redistricting that will also be on our ballot this upcoming November. And then depending on your municipality, you might have a local, county race, or excuse me, or city race or municipal race. And you may also have like a school levy, depending if your particular community has that. So it can be overwhelming if you're seeing all that information, on the day that you're deciding to cast your ballot. So it's really important that you take the time. Again, you can download your sample ballot directly from the Board of Election. You just have to put in your name, date of birth, the ward or community that you live in, and boom, it'll populate for you. If you have access to a printer, you can print that out. And again, it's really easy because then you can have your sample ballot, you can have your computer up or your smartphone and start to do that research. And you can go into the Board of Elections with your, I call a little cheat sheet, right? Because sometimes it can be really overwhelming to go in there and try to remember all the information and make sure that you know that you're voting the way that you plan to vote. So that's really important as well. I also want to alert everyone that there have been some identification changes as it relates to what is permissible. So there was legislation that passed in 2022, excuse me, and that went into effect in 2023 that did change what type of ID is permissible. This is also really important because, again, you don't want to show up on election day and not have the proper form of ID. So for instance, you have to have an unexpired state ID or state license. In the past, you would be able to bring a utility bill, a bank statement that had your name and the address. That is no longer permitted. And again, in the follow-up email, I'll have a resource that you all can check out and see that comprehensive list of what is permissible and what is not. So that's the kind of the nuts and bolts. I know I have 3 more minutes before we're going to transition. Some other encouragements I wanted to share with you all today is once you have your oxygen mask on and you have your plan, what are you going to do next? Well, you're going to text your mama, your brother, your cousin, your neighbor, your colleague, right? Because it's not just about you being election ready. How can you make sure your family, your neighbors, your colleagues are also election ready? And do it in a way that's not telling them how to vote, but just that they have the information so they can make the best and most informed decision for themselves, right? So that's really important. I always tell people the big grandiose event is not always the most effective, right? Sometimes people feel really overwhelmed. They're like, I'm just, person A, and how do I try to do all these things? You don't have to try to do all those things. It is incredibly effective on that peer-to-peer communication. If you're like me, you're probably throwing your phone across the room at this point because we're getting all these unsolicited text messages. Even as someone that does this work, I also don't want to receive these unsolicited text messages. So, if I get a text from Shan, you're popping up on my screen right here, I'm going to be more likely to be like, what is Shan texting me, right? Versus random person for this campaign or this levy or this thing, right? And so that peer-to-peer connection is really important. And that really is grounded in that trust factor, right? We, again, as I said at the top of the hour, myths and disinformation is a lot about information out there that we don't know is whether or not it's accurate. So again, getting information from our immediate circle is really important. There's also tons of ways to volunteer and tap in. And I always say it's a spectrum, right? Everyone's day-to-day life looks different. And so you really have to think about what is going to allow you to shine your best, right? Don't feel pressured or obligated to do a thing because you see everyone doing the thing. If everyone's going to the rally and that's not your jam, that's okay, right? If you're like, I'm introvert like my husband, I'm not trying to be outside with all those people. But you know what? I can write some postcards. I bet you the League of Women Voters would welcome that opportunity for you to, handwrite a bunch of postcards reminding folks to vote. So it's really important to think about, one, what is your interest? What is your skill set? And what is your time commitment? Again, you don't want to do something that's going above and beyond what you have capacity to do. And so whether that is signing up to be a poll worker on election day, we have seen, unfortunately, still challenges with hiring poll workers since 2020. Many poll workers before 2020 were more mature age individuals. And for rightful reasons during COVID, a lot of those folks were like, I can't come outside, right? And I know not just our Board of Election, but a Board of Elections across the country continue to be challenged with having poll workers. So if you have the ability to take off on election day, they do have paid positions. And so that's something that I would highly encourage. And then I said, I noted before, there are a number of campaigns, at least up here in Northeast Ohio. There's the Arts and Culture Levy, CMSD, there's a statewide redistricting. All of these campaigns would welcome the opportunity to volunteer. And again, there's various opportunities, whether that's canvassing, door knocking, phone and text banking. Technology has really advanced where a lot of these you can do from your home. You don't even have to go to a physical location. Usually it's just downloading an app onto your smartphone or your computer, and you can do the phone and texting. The organization will provide you the list and the script and the messaging and all that. So just really thinking about, again, what most aligns with you and what makes sense for you. So with that, I'm going to pause because we're right at 12:15.
Erica, thank you. So let's jump in. Regarding the ballot, when is it locked in? So by voting early, is there a possibility the ballot's going to change before the actual voting day at this point?
No. So they are printing or being the process of being printed. You have to request your vote by mail no later than October 29th. But actually on the Board of Elections website right now, there's a note showing that basically that they have already begun to deliver ballots if people have requested that already. So if you are someone that requested your absentee ballot, they're already starting to come out. So no changes to the ballot at this point.
And you mentioned all of the different issues and the candidates. Where could someone turn to really have a reliable source to learn about the different candidates and the different issues?
Yeah, I highly recommend Vote 411, which is spearheaded by the League of Women Voters. Similar to the Board of Elections, where you can pull down your sample ballot, they have the same feature. One layer below that would be they enable you to be able then to click on the candidates and the issues, and they'll take you to information that will talk about that issue for and against. In my follow-up email, I'm going to share a couple of other handouts that we have. So we've done one for the CMSD levy, which breaks down, what does a yes vote mean? What does a no vote mean? And we've done the same thing for the arts and culture levy. And so we have an entire bank of free downloadable graphics and information that my teammate, Brianna, I tend to act like I'm French and say we. Erika did not create those things. My beloved teammate Brianna did, just so we can make sure that folks have this accessible. And we have digital versions and print versions. So if your organization is having an event and you want print versions, we also will do our best to print if that is a barrier for organizations. We try not to print too much for eco-friendly reasons. We don't want to have hundreds of papers sitting in our office after election day. But we definitely always have some on deck, and there's always someone in the office. And so if that was something that folks needed and did not have the ability to print themselves, we can definitely make accommodations.
We are in a time where information is everywhere and it's not always accurate information. How
Yes.
do you advise folks to kind of weed through the noise that's out there and really get to the heart of what's actually happening and what might not be accurate?
Yeah, so I think it starts with what are your already existing trusted resources that you're engaging with. Getting on social media is a gamble. That's the only way to say it. As much monitoring as the various powers that be have tried to impart on different platforms like Instagram, X, and Facebook, and things of that nature. We are still seeing, particularly this year, the advent of how AI is showing up in elections. And so that makes it even more scary. And we started talking about this in our organization last year, and many of my teammates were, attending webinars and going to different conferences that were helping us to begin to help to identify. And so, the pop-up organizations that come out of nowhere. We had an issue about 4 months ago where a Cleveland Votes popped up in Cleveland, set up an office, and they were doing some stuff in the community, and it was not us. And so it's really scary to see how individuals that don't have the best intentions, I'll say it as nicely as I possibly can, will try to sway people to form an opinion, right, about a candidate or an issue. And so just really being cognizant, I think multiple sources is also really important. So if you see an article in one of the national publications, check and see if other national publications are talking about that information. And then I think there's just amazing go-to organizations that we have here in the state. We have our statewide League of Women Voters. We have the League of Women Voters Greater Cleveland. We also have Common Cause, which is a statewide organization. All Voting is Local is also statewide. Our organization, and then locally, we work with organizations like Northeast Ohio Voter Advocates, some of the issue-based organizations like NEOC or Renounce, Denounce. And so again, there is a cadre of folks that are here. We have 26 organizations that we provided grants to a couple of months ago. All those organizations are listed on our website. And so, if you have members of your community that maybe are Spanish speaking members of the community, we have organizations that are working with our Latinx members of the community. We have those that are working with our AAPI members of our community. So again, just, really relying upon that trusted network to ensure, again, to the best of our ability. And that's all I can say. It's not ironclad, but to the best of our ability that we're consuming and, relaying information in an accurate fashion.
As you look across Cuyahoga County, what does that landscape look like in terms of voter engagement and potential voter turnout for this election?
Yeah, it's a little bit of a wild card because again, 2020 was such an obscure year. We not only had the presidential election, we had census, but all of that was masked with COVID. And so even from a comparison standpoint, we really don't have a true like last presidential election year turnout because we were so hampered by the inability to be physically in person. And so much, obviously, all of us, not just our type of organizations, had to do things virtually. But what we have seen, unbeknownst, I think, to a lot of people, 2023 was an off election year. Quotes, because we never think any year is an off election year, but according to the national pundits, right? 2023 was an off election year. And what we saw was astronomical turnout in comparison to what previous similar year elections saw as far as turnout. And the main reason is what we're starting to see, not just here in Ohio, but nationally, people connect more effectively to issues. And that's not to, slight candidates and their value and what they mean in creating, a democracy. But at the end of the day, I have the values that are most important to me. Each of you have values that are most important to you, your loved ones, your family, your children. And as a result, when we see some of those issues show up on the ballot last year, in our case, we had reproductive rights, we had recreational marijuana. Locally, we had a couple of issues. Those are the things that folks are going to connect to a little bit more effectively. And so I think as we increasingly see more issues on the ballot, we're going to see more people turning out. We had two phenomenal young interns this summer who are still with us this fall. And, just great to, have casual conversations with them. I am not of their demographic, unbeknownst to me, but I am no longer that, 18, 19-year-old. And so, unofficially no science to this, but just, talking to them and just trying to learn from them, honestly, and how are we communicating? Are there ways that we can more effectively communicate, particularly as it relates to your demographic, young adults? And they had some really great insight, and they provided us, recommendations that we've imparted, particularly in our social media and our communications. So I think it's important just to think about what are the pressing issues that people are most concerned about, and then translating that to how it shows up on the ballot. And that's not an easy task to try to overcome because people are busy. And usually if you're out in the field, you have, 30 seconds to a minute to chat with folks. But it's just really important to encourage folks, both on the issue side, but also on the candidate side. If X, Y, and Z are important to you, where does your candidate or candidate stand on those issues, and help you to think about then how best to make a decision about a particular candidate.
Can you explain some options available for individuals who want to vote in person but might have mobility issues, particularly curbside voting availability?
Yes. So there's been a little bit of controversy this year, going back to accurate information. But if you are an individual that does have any form of disability, not just mobile physical disability, you are legally required to have the option of curbside voting. And you do not actually have to claim exactly what the issue is. You just have to pull up to that polling location and request that you have curbside voting. Our Secretary of State, via the Cuyahoga County Board of Elections, is required to have a bipartisan team come out. So an individual that identifies with the Republican Party and an individual that identifies with the Democratic Party, to ensure that there isn't any sort of partisan tampering, for lack of a better term, and in hopes of making it a safe and equitable process for individuals. However, we know that just through what we hear in the field from other partners, oftentimes folks are denied that access. So it's really important, and I'll drop this link in as well, that people utilize the election protection hotline. Even if you're like, oh, this is small, I don't think I should report this. It's really important because in order for advocates like ourselves and others across the state, if we don't have the testimonial directly from voters, then we have no way to advocate on your behalf and on behalf of others, and or prevent someone else from experiencing a situation where they're not being made available access in a fair and equitable way to the ballot. And so what you'll see on the link that I just dropped in, there's a hotline. The hotline is also available in multiple languages. So English, Spanish, a number of Asian languages, as well as Arabic. So again, depending on who you're engaging with in the community, we highly recommend sharing this information. This is also another volunteer opportunity. If this is something of interest, in addition to some of the recommendations I provided before, election protection is always looking for folks to help out on election day and be, there on the phone and on the website, monitoring any sort of requests that come in.
So let's look back over 10 years of Cleveland Votes.
Mm.
From co-founder perspective to now the executive director, what are you most proud of over the past 10 years for the organization?
Rachel, we only have 4 minutes left. That is an unfair question. What am I most proud of? I am most proud of the team. Many of the folks, past and present, didn't necessarily have a traditional organizing pathway that led them to Cleveland Votes. And I think that's actually positive. And it's not to say that having a traditional pathway would not have been positive, but what that has allowed is diverse thought and lived experience, both professionally and personally. I don't think there is a solution that is going to be a silver bullet to how do we create a more equitable democracy. It is a term that we are fighting to retain. We have not actually realized it in all the facets that I think the founders, saw it fit. And so understanding that is making some level of acknowledgement that we don't quite have the democracy that maybe some of us desire to have. And therefore, the innovation that goes into how to engage folks has to constantly shift and change. And so some of the programs that we have introduced this year, one of them being More Than My Art. This is our new program in partnership with creatives and artists in the community. And it's really our way of saying, there's a different way to tell the story. And sometimes a creative individual, an artist, a cultural bearer, have a more effective way to communicate that. So it's like, how do you take Erica's geeky, boring bullet points, right, and communicate the same message in a way that may resonate with a different set of folks in the community who don't resonate with the geeky bullet points, right? Another program that we launched last year is called the Democracy Collective. This is a fellowship incubator, really investing in existing leaders in our community and saying, how can we make sure that they have all the resources and knowledge so they can most effectively address the issues that they are most prioritizing either for themselves or for their community. And so I think it's really everything in the kitchen sink. I don't think anything is off the table. It's strategic, but it's also acknowledging that one method is not going to take us to the promised land, right? We're not going to have the ability to create this more liberatory future if we're only staying tunnel focused on one way to connect with people. We really have to be adaptable. And I think, again, both past and present team members of Cleveland Votes have done that with just excellence. So I'm really proud.
And final question, how can we best support you and your team in your work?
Whew. Send all the good vibes to us. We like coffee. We're gonna need a lot of it over the next couple of weeks. No, in all honesty, after some of the conventions that took place last month, um, former First Lady Michelle Obama, made a declaration of do something, and that really stuck with me. And again, in a nonpartisan way, not trying to, pull one candidate over the other. It's just a statement. And I think all of us have to do something. And I provided a couple of opportunities of how we can do that. For us, obviously donating to our organization so we can continue to resource the work, showing up and volunteering at some of the places that I mentioned earlier today. But also it could just be a porch talk with your neighbor, coffee with a friend, a lunch break conversation and share maybe one or two nuggets that you might have garnered from today's conversation, that all collectively actually would allow us all to do something amazing.
Well, Erika, we thank you and your team for all of the work you are doing to reach voters in our community. And such, every year is an important year, but 2024 certainly is proving to be a very interesting, important year. So thank you for all that you do.
Thank you. And thank you for the invitation. And I hope you all have a wonderful afternoon.